Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to discover how to write a simple waltz for the piano. And you can see that I've got on the screen 10 bars, 10 measures that could be the opening of a waltz. And I've already decided that the first 2 bars are going to be an introduction. So these first 2 measures here will be our intro. And then basically after that, we've got 8 bars, 8 measures that are going to fit into 2 phrases. So we're going to have a first phrase that takes, ooh, that was an interesting thing that just happened there. Just bear with me, talk amongst yourselves. Let's try that again. And let's have the first 2 there, carrying on to here. And then we're going to have another 4 bars, 4 measures in the second phrase to take us to the end of this page. So that's the structure behind it. Now, very simple left hand going on here. And the thing that often happens in a waltz, which is this. Obviously, a waltz has got 3 beats in every bar, 3 beats per measure. Hence, we're writing in 3/4 in this case. And the pattern is often this. You have a bass note on the first beat of each bar. So if we look at what's happening at the beginning of every bar, bass note, bass note, bass note, bass note, bass note, bass note, and so on. What happens on the second and the third beats is, having had the bass note on the first beat, on the strong beat, you then often have a chord that is repeated. So we've just got the bass note, but we don't know what the chord is that belongs to that until we hear this. And then we think, C, E, G, it's all spelling out chord 1 or a C major chord. So you get bass, chord, chord, bass, chord, chord. And that's a very typical left-hand backdrop to a piano waltz. And you don't have to make your chords, your harmony complicated. I mean, you can make this as complicated as you want to, but if you're thinking, oh, I'm not that confident with chords, well, what could I do? It's amazing how much of a waltz you can write using 2 chords. And in this waltz, I'm using 2 chords. Chord 1, C, E, G, and I'm also using chord 5, 7. So that's chord 5 is G, B, D. Adding a 7th just to give it a bit more colour, F. So what's happening in this? We've got 1, 1 for the introduction. Then we've got chord 1, chord 5, 7, back to chord 1. And then I'm doing the same thing again. Chord 1, chord 5, 7, back to 1. Bass note on the first beat, rest of the chord on the second and the third beat. The second and the third beat are just identical. Repeat the same thing twice and it tends to work quite well. You don't have to do that, but it's a nice simple way of doing it. And sort of having your chord placed above your bass note just helps to kind of space things out quite nicely. So I've got a left-hand pattern for this waltz, and it's quite helpful sometimes to write your left-hand pattern first. So here's the introduction, then the first phrase. Change to the 5, 7, come back to the 1. Second phrase, 1, 1, 5, 7, 1. So it's fairly straightforward stuff to organise. All we now need to do is to put a right-hand melody in that brings our waltz to life. It's a bit boring at the moment, isn't it? So we need some kind of tune in the right hand. What are my options when I want to write this melody in the right hand? Well, I can use notes that belong to the chord. So if I'm using chord 1, that's C, E, and G, I can have a melody that uses those notes, can't I? C, E, and G. So if my left hand is just going to do this with the chord 1, then my right hand can go C, E, G, G, E, C, E, C, G, G, C, E. I could carry on all day doing that, couldn't I? It can be a bit boring if that's all you do. In other words, you're just using what we call harmony notes or chord tones, notes that are in the chord. But you can do these things called inessential notes or non-chord tones that kind of fit in between. So you could take a note that belongs to the chord like C, and you could go C, D, C, and we just call that D an upper auxiliary note or an upper neighbour tone. So D is not in the chord, so it's got a clashes with the chord. So you think, is that a good idea? But if you go C, D, C, works quite well. You could go the other way, C, B, C, and the B would be a lower auxiliary note or a lower neighbour tone. You can also do something called passing notes or passing tones. C and E are both notes that belong to my chord 1, but I could go C, D, E. So D, sandwiched between C and E, going by step, is a passing note or a passing tone. It's just passing by on its way between two notes that belong to the chord. I could go the other way. So, in other words, I've got 3 chord tones or 3 harmony notes. I've got C, E, and G. So I could use those auxiliary or neighbour tones on any of those notes. Here it is on E. Here it is on G. I could also use passing notes or passing tones. I could do this. Excuse me. So you see what's happening then between the auxiliary notes or the neighbour tones and the passing notes or the passing tones. I've got lots of different options to make my melody a bit more interesting than just going C, E, G, G, E, C, G, C, E, which sounds a bit robotic, doesn't it? So then you can kind of think, well, can I make a nice tune that sort of fits? How about this for a possibility? And you can vary the rhythm. So you could have a bit of a mixture of crotchets and quavers, quarter notes and eighth notes. And you could write something like this. So how about that for the melody for my first phrase? What I've got there is I'm starting on C, that belongs to the chord. I play C again, that belongs to the chord. D is a passing note or a passing tone. E is a harmony note or a chord tone. F is a passing note or a passing tone. G belongs to the chord, so it's a harmony note or a chord tone. A is an upper auxiliary note or an upper neighbour tone because it comes back to G. So now I've got... And because I've got a bit of variety in the rhythm, that sounds sort of quite nice, doesn't it? Then, of course, my chord changes. So when I come to this bar, this measure, well, I've now got chord 5, 7. I've got this G, B, D, F. I've got 4 notes instead of 3. That's quite handy. I can do exactly the same tricks again. So I could take a G and go upper auxiliary, upper neighbour tone, or lower neighbour tone, lower auxiliary. I could use passing notes, or I can come the other way. So I'm doing exactly the same tricks, but now I've just got to think, but now I'm with a different chord. So let's have a go writing something in here. So I'm going to use the F, which is the 7th of the chord. So that's a chord tone or a harmony note. I'll repeat it and then use a passing note or a passing tone. And then how about this? I'm just going to jump between 2 harmony notes or 2 chord tones. I'm going to go from D to F. And then we'll finish this phrase by doing something a bit less complicated, just using a harmony note, a chord tone, and go to another one. And have a longer note because it's the end of the phrase. And also you might have noticed I've used the same rhythm in these 2 bars, these 2 measures as I have here, except that instead of having these 2 quavers or 2 eighth notes, I've just got 1 quarter note. So there's identifiable as the same rhythm, but it's slightly different. So my first phrase. And that first 4-bar phrase, first 4 measure phrase, breaks into kind of 2 plus 2, doesn't it? It feels like a musical question. Then there's a kind of musical answer. You see how that works? Great. Okay, well, the second phrase has got exactly the same left hand as the first phrase, but if we did exactly the same melody, well, it might be slightly boring. On the other hand, it's quite nice to have something that's a bit familiar. So how about we kind of do the first half the same way as we did it last time, and we do something different in the second half. So we get the right thing on. So we could write this exactly the same way as the last phrase started. So that's just the same again. And this time I'm going to do something different. Well, the first time I went, and then I just came down a note and kind of finished it off. So the first phrase started here, it kind of climbed, and then the second bit of the phrase kind of came back down again. Let's have a slightly different shape. So we've climbed in the same way the second time, but now let's go up and make a little bit of a climax. So I'm going to go higher. I'm going to go up all the way up to a D. How about that? Which is another harmony note or chord tone. And then I'm going to come down a scale and I'm going to fill the whole bar with quavers or eighth notes. And you can see how this gives me a bit more energy in the rhythm than we had before. And how do we justify this? Well, that belongs to the chord, passing note or a passing tone. Belongs to the chord, passing. Belongs to the chord, passing. Okay, so I just now need to finish off. And I need something simple to finish off. So maybe I'll finish off exactly as I did before. So the last bar of this phrase also becomes the last bar of this phrase. But you see, all I've changed is the third bar to give it a different feel. So this second phrase, if I now play from here, goes like this. So it makes the second phrase sound like, oh yeah, it belongs to the first phrase, but something different has happened. So let's put all this together. What have we got? We've got 2 bars of introduction. It sounds like a waltz, doesn't it? Now, there are all sorts of things you can decide thereafter. You can decide, is this a fast waltz or a slow waltz or something in between? So you can choose the speed. You can think about the dynamics. Is it loud? Is it quiet? Is it all the same? Is it going to change? Is the second phrase going to be quieter than the first phrase or the other way around? Are we going to have a crescendo getting louder or a diminuendo getting quieter? Are we going to play smoothly? Are we going to detach the notes? We can put phrasing, all sorts of things that will polish up your waltz. But that would give you the first section of a waltz. You could go on and develop your waltz and have something contrasting next, and then maybe come back and do this again at the end. And before you know it, you've got a composition, a waltz. So it's kind of like this is an opportunity for people who kind of want to compose, want to write some music, but maybe a little bit unsure how to go about it. Where could you start? Writing a waltz like this is a very good way to begin. So I hope that's been a helpful way of getting into this if you're maybe relatively new to it. And even if you've been doing this for a while, I hope there's been something helpful about how to go about writing a waltz. Well, if you've enjoyed this video and now you're thinking, well, you know, I could do with knowing a little bit more about this kind of way of doing things and getting a bit confident about how to compose and knowing the sort of things I need to think about, let me point you to a particular course on the Music Matters website. So if you go to www.mmcourses.co.uk, click on courses, and then as you scroll down the courses, there may be all sorts of things that are of interest to you. You'll see one called composition, and click on that course, and that would teach you kind of what you need to think about with melody and rhythm and chords and kind of how to structure a piece in order to write a piece of music that's going to work well for you. So see what else is on there as well, but have a look at that one in particular. www.mmcourses.co.uk.